I think a lot of people would wish that their life was transformed, and that it didn't take forever to do it. That they could wave a magic wand and suddenly their life would be transformed. It would be better. Well, that's rarely the case. But as I think back on all my clients and all my friends, there have been a relatively few, but some people who have indeed, almost inexplicably, in a flash, changed their life for the better. And I'm going to share those. I looked at the ways in which people made those changes, and I'm going to share with you the 7 most common ways that they have made that instant change just happened. And then I'm going to talk about 3 ways that people make big changes in their life, change their life, improve their life radically, but slowly, which is more common but less sexy. So we'll start with the fast ways. First of all, recent client. This was a guy who, frankly, I asked a tactful question. I noticed he was very passionate about saying almost everything. But there was always anger that was underneath it, and anger kind of suffused his whole life, it seemed, as he was describing things. Angry at other people, angry at the world, angry even when he was passionately in favor of something, there would be an angry tinge. And so I asked him this question. I said, I really appreciate your intelligence and your passion, but is there a tinge, and I deliberately understated it, a tinge of anger in there? And he then told me he was really embarrassed by that fact that I noticed it, and that it's true, and that indeed throughout his life, anger has suffused his who he is. And he said, this was about a week ago, and he said, this is, I'm going to have a zero tolerance policy for any anger in me, because I know I'm not an incrementalist, because if I just reduce it a little bit, I'll still have the choice all the time, how annoyed can I make myself, or how annoyed am I allowed to make myself, or how angry. But with a zero tolerance policy, he thought that might work. Well, long story short, a week later, he said, I can't believe it. From that very instant, I felt calmer. I felt less oppositional. I was still passionate. I was still engaged, still as productive, still as committed to being effective as possible in life. But I was calm. And I found, interestingly, that people were more likely to listen to him than they otherwise would. He always complained about people being close to his ideas. And he said, in that calm, less browbeating way, people were, they didn't immediately embrace his ideas. People tend to not like any ideas other than their own, but they were more open to his ideas. So, one way in which you can potentially make an instant transformational change is by maybe you asking yourself a tactful, hard question. And then maybe having a zero tolerance policy regarding whatever it is, that flaw that you've self-identified, or maybe somebody else has asked you. Now, sometimes, you may not be able to ask yourself the question. You don't know what quite question to ask you. But stay alert to people asking you a tactful question. That even though it's tactful, doesn't mean it's not real serious, etc. Nice people tend to be tactful. And see if that could create an epiphany in you that makes you want to suddenly change. So that's the one fast way, potentially, to change your life. Now the second one, and this is much more ethereal, it's hard to pin down, and that is there have been a number of people, my clients and friends, who've kind of slogged along, for a long time with their problem, whether it be procrastination or substance abuse, and then inexplicably, suddenly, one moment or one day, they decided they were going to do a 180. They were going to change and completely stop. No more procrastination. It's ruined their life. No more substance abuse. It's ruined their life. And zero tolerance again. And they simply changed, like cigarette smokers who suddenly just decide, I'm going to stop. Now, again, I'm obsessed. Obsessed is too strong a word. I'm very concerned about not being hypey, like a typical self-help guru type. So most people can have that epiphany, and then within a day or four, they're back to being the same old self. But a certain number of people that I've come in contact with have suddenly decided, you know what, and I can't explain why, but now, starting today, I'm going to stop my, whatever that bad habit is, or replace it with something positive. So if they were doing drugs, they say, damn it, I'm doing drugs in part because I'm bored. I'm going to spend my time writing a great American novel, or playing the guitar, or drawing landscapes, or whatever the heck it is, or calling friends, or volunteering for a good cause. So that's number two. First one was, again, a tactful question can sometimes create an instant transformation. Two, it's inexplicable, some sudden, it just happens that you just say, damn it, I've had enough, I'm going to change. The third way in which people make rapid transformational changes is they do it for a romantic partner or their child. I've heard statements like, I just met this great guy, and you know what, I'm really going to straighten out my act. And they suddenly make a huge transformational change because they really care about that romantic partner. Or I remember an example of where a woman was pregnant, and she says, you know what, I want to be a good role model for my kid. I don't want to be the asshole that I am. So, it's number three way of making a possible rapid transformational change is to do it for your romantic partner or your kid. The fourth way that you may be able to make a transformational change rapidly is to prove somebody wrong. There have been many examples of where a parent has said, for example, I just don't think you're smart enough for that, or you can't do that, or you're too ugly, or whatever. And then that triggers the person to say, I'll show you, I'll prove them wrong. Often it's a counselor. I remember an example of where a high school counselor taught a kid who was bright but hated school, and so he did poorly in school. And the high school counselor said, I think you would do well working for the post office. Well, he really got pissed at that. And what he is now, and I swear this is the truth, he is a famous veterinarian who is asked to give talks all over the world. This guy who, not there's anything wrong with working at the post office, but this guy had the potential to do something requiring far more brain power. One more example, and I know I'm going to get this wrong, but it's close enough. This guy was a class clown in high school, and he wrote his final exam, which was an essay exam for English, and he used his joking self, I guess, and the teacher wrote back something quite literary. He says, would you stop your unintelligent, unfunny, puerile sense of humor? I'm bored with you, or something like that. It was better than that. But that was a wake-up call for him. He didn't want to be perceived as just some dumb class clown and trying to joke his way to success. And I now like to tell you what he does for a living. This part is fact. He is a college president. And I love it. Anyway, so the fourth way that sometimes people make an instant transformation is to try to, when somebody says something terrible about them and they say, I'm going to show you, I'm going to prove you wrong. The fifth approach to possibly making a rapid transformational change is having a role model. It could be somebody from your life. It could be, I want to be like this, my boss or my friend or whatever. Or it could be fictitious. It could be, it could be a famous person you don't know, like a biography. It could be Eleanor Roosevelt, or conversely, Margaret Thatcher. Or it could be somebody from TV. I personally think a great role model is Walt Longmire. He is the sheriff on a TV series by his own name. The series is called Longmire. He's very smart, he's very ethical, he's very calm, and he's literary. I really like that personality. So sometimes a role model can say, you know what, I want to be like that. And rather than doing incrementally because it's hard, but again, you say, I'm going to be that person. Does it always work? Absolutely not. Might it occasionally work? Yes. The sixth of the 7 ways in which a rapid transformation might be possible is simply a momentary observation. Maybe you've been a very self-absorbed middle-class person, only thinking about your middle-class lifestyle stuff, and you're walking to Trader Joe's and you see a homeless person, and for some reason that homeless person calls out to you. I don't mean literally, but makes you feel sympathetic. You say, damn it, you know what, I'm going to allocate a little more of my time to the people who, either for their own efforts or bad luck or a combination, are not doing well. What else? There's another example that I want to think about. What's another example of something that's more... Oh, yeah. Sometimes it's a quote. It's a momentary quote that you just... It just captivates you. I want to show you one that it so captivated me that I made a plaque. If you're watching this on YouTube, I want to show it to you. If you're listening on the Apple or Spotify podcast, How to Do Life, and you can't see it, but here it is. Let me see. There we go. Okay. I saw that quote, and particularly because I've got a PhD from Berkeley, I was taken by one line particularly within that. It says, the world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. That was said by President Calvin Coolidge. And that sits on this plaque sits on my wall, right next to my desk. So, sometimes a momentary, whether it be seeing something or reading something, that can be transformative. And finally, and least happy to talk about, is hitting rock bottom. There are some people who have made a transformational change because they simply hit rock bottom. And they say, you know what, and one person said, I don't remember who, it was a client or even something I read, but it was, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And then changed. Now, of course, there's recidivism. People go back. But it may well be that, I guess my main point is stay alert to these little seemingly effervescent, transient, little experiences, even if they're momentary. Sometimes they can be transformational. Let me review those very quickly, all 7, and then we're going to take a break, and then I'm going to talk about slow but much more likely paths to being having a transformation. So the 7 fast ways are a tactful question that you would either ask yourself. It's a tactful but hard question about yourself that either you would ask yourself, or if you're fortunate enough for somebody to ask it to you, instead of getting defensive, trying to really carefully consider it. 2, the inexplicable. Sometimes you're just slogging along with a problem, and then inexplicably, you suddenly decide, okay, I'm going to change. 3, you decide to make a transformational change for your romantic partner because you really want to keep that relationship, or because you want to be a great role model for your kid. Number 4, occasionally a person can make a transformational change because somebody said something denigrating to them. And they said, you know what, damn it, I'm going to prove them wrong. A 5th way is that one could make a transformational change is a role model. Either somebody you know in your professional life or personal life, or a famous person, somebody you admire, or a fictitious person, somebody you've seen in a movie or on TV. A 6th way to make a rapid transformational change is, as I said, some momentary observation, whether it be a quote you read, something somebody says, somebody you see, something you see. And finally, number 7, sometimes people have made a radical transformation only when they've hit rock bottom. Okay, I'm going to take a brief break, and when I come back, I'm going to talk about the 3 slow but much more likely ways to transform your life. How to make the most of school, how to make the most of your out-of-school learning, and how to make the most of practice. You're listening to How to Do Life. I am Marty Nemko. I'll be back in just 15 seconds or so. Please stay with me. Okay, I appreciate you staying with me. This is Marty Nemko. Okay, as promised, we talked about 7 fast ways that you can potentially make turn your life around or take it to the next level, as they say, some big transformational change. But now I want to talk about 3 slow ones: how to make the most of school, how to make the most of your out-of-school learning, and how to make the most of practice. Now, when I'm talking here about school, I'm mainly talking about college or graduate school specifically for career training. So you're choosing your major that would be career related, not like liberal arts. And by the way, there's everything good about liberal arts if it's taught well, because it does tend to focus more on critical thinking in general. It does tend to make you more of a connoisseur of life. It does tend to make you a better citizen. We're not all careerists, and we shouldn't be all careerists. But for purposes of this conversation, we're talking about making a transformational change in your life the slow way, making the most of school, viewing it in terms of the quality of its career preparation and how you can make the most of it, is what I want to talk about. So in choosing whether it be the university or a major or a graduate program, like an MBA or a PhD in psychology or whatever, a law degree, it's important to choose a school that is more practically oriented. And this is hard for many people to believe, but I'll just say, because my PhD is in the evaluation of education for Berkeley, I do know a lot about that. And paradoxically, the more prestigious the university, the more likely it is to be theory-oriented. And theory is great if you're planning to be an academic, a researcher, a professor. But if you're trying to become a master practitioner at whatever it is, you're normally better to, paradoxically, avoid the most prestigious universities, because most of the professors and much of what they teach, too much of what they teach, is theoretical. And when they try to be practical, because they're not master practitioners, they often lack the sufficient nuance in the art of being that master practitioner. So look for schools that in their description on the website describe that they're being practical rather than mentioning theory and new models and research. Read the bios of professors and see, they don't all have to be, but if there really are a significant number of master practitioners, or at least their bios make them appear to be master practitioners as you choose your program. Then importantly, choose your advisor as someone who is very practical. When who maybe is doing a lot of consulting in the real world, who has if it's medical school, somebody who has a very busy clinical practice, or if it's a law professor, somebody who has a very active law practice, especially in a specialty that you find interesting. When you're taking courses, where you have discretion, focus on taking practical courses. As you're listening to the lectures or doing the readings or in discussions, whenever a concept is made, ask yourself, how might, if at all, this be applied to my career, to becoming a master in my career? When you have a paper or a project to do, or ask yourself, how can I use this topic, even pivot it slightly, so that it would help me toward my goal of being a master, becoming an expert in my career. And certainly, most professional training programs, training you to be a professional, MBA, doctor, lawyer, nurse, whatever, have practicums, internships, field work, and very often a capstone experience, which could either be a thesis, which is academic, which I would not so recommend for somebody who's interested in career practice, being a master practitioner, or you can do a capstone project. Especially in these practicums, practica, try to really make sure you've got a good supervisor and that you've got a placement that gives you a really good chance to do some really substantive things under some quality supervision that's practical. And if not, request a change. So that's what I want to say about how to make the most of a graduate or undergraduate degree that's career-oriented. And that's really, it's not the fast route, but as I'm saying, more often than the 7 fast methods of transforming your life, the slow methods are much more likely, and especially if you use those tips that I've just offered you on how to make the most of school. But of course, education doesn't just occur in school. As many people, despite advanced degrees, say that they learn more out of school than in. And indeed, I know the term, lifetime learner is a cliche, but it's a true cliche. It's true. Being a lifelong learner, looking for the little, when you have bits of time, filling them with little learning opportunities, whether it's to Google to find an article, whether it's to watch a YouTube video that's on target, whether it's to ask a coworker or some expert a question by email or text or whatever, taking a single class that is practical, that has high student ratings that are based much more on the practicality of what the students learn, the takeaways, than on how entertaining the instructor. Sure, we all love an entertaining instructor, but make sure that that highly rated course is highly rated not just because the person's a comedian, but because there really are useful practical takeaways. Another great way to out of when you're in the real world, become a master is watch a master at work. One or more masters at work. Everybody's got different skill sets, different natural aptitudes. If you can ask permission to watch a master at work, having them watch you can be invaluable. Right? So out of school learning can be inordinately valuable in transforming yourself slowly. School, making the most of school, as I said, and now making the most of out of school, and the third thing is practice. The reality is that, almost by definition, becoming a master requires practice at it. Nobody's a master initially. I do remember when I first hosted a radio show, I asked my program manager, I said, how can I improve? And he said, Marty, it just takes some time. And I wasn't happy with the answer, but practice, it doesn't make perfect necessarily, but practice is great. But of course, if you practice it badly again and again, you're going to have a bad result. So the smart thing to do is to really embrace feedback. Some of it you're going to get automatically, the semi-annual performance review that you get, at work, if you're lucky. But you've got to ask for feedback from people you respect, coworkers, supervisees, customers, clients, and your boss. So you might say something like to your boss, because you don't want to seem like you're desperate, I'm really so insecure, but you want to seem like a professional who wants to grow. So you might tell your boss, for example, Jane, like all professionals, I'm trying to get ever better. So in addition to our semi-annual performance review, I'm wondering if ongoing you might, when you see something that I might improve, or even something that's good, you want to give me an attaboy, I'd welcome your feedback. And then, finally, not all feedback is worthy. I like to think of getting feedback as like all your advisors, these respected friends and colleagues and coworkers and bosses and whatever, they are like the consigliere in The Godfather. They're the advisor. But you are the Don. You decide which ones you want to accept, which ones you want to revise, which ones you want to ignore. So those are the ways from where I said, are the three ways that more slowly than the fast ways I mentioned earlier, that you can legitimately hope to transform yourself. And these slow ways are much more realistic. And even apart from the goal, the process is enjoyable if you're making the most of these things. So I don't want you to just think, oh my God, I'm going to spend all these years and yucky activities to try to get to be the expert. It may well be that if you make the most of school as I outlined, as you make the most of your out-of-school learning as I outlined, as you make the most of your practice as I outlined, you can enjoy the process of life. And you may or may not become an expert, but you'll certainly get a lot better and feel better about your life. At least that's what I think. In any event, I do thank you for watching. I am Marty Nemko. As I like to end every show, I do believe that we find comfort among those who agree with us, growth among those who don't.